It's funny how political power works. One day, the system looks unbreakable. Filibusters, shutdowns, backroom deals. Then someone makes a move so unexpected, it flips the whole chessboard. That's what we're seeing right now. Chuck Schumer just proposed what he calls a solution to end the shutdown. But behind the scenes, President Trump is preparing one of his boldest strategic plays yet, and it's got Democrats pacing the floor in panic. Because this isn't just about reopening the government. It's about who controls the future of America's political system and whether the old rules still apply. Let's break down what's really happening and why this moment might shape the next decade. Picture this. It's day 38 of a government shutdown. Federal workers are lining up at food banks. Air traffic controllers are calling in because they can't afford gas to get to work. Travelers are stuck in airports, watching flight delays stack up like dominoes. One woman interviewed at a terminal said she hoped senators and congressmen would get stuck somewhere so they'd finally feel the urgency. Another traveler, visiting from Singapore, worried about being trapped in America indefinitely. The tension is real, and it's building every single day. Now, here's the thing about pressure cookers. They work because the heat has nowhere to go. The longer you wait, the more intense it gets. That's exactly what's happening in Washington. Both parties are locked in a game of endurance, waiting to see who blinks first. But while the public sees chaos, one side seems to be working from a playbook that's 3 moves ahead. The other? Well, they're scrambling to keep up. And that's where Schumer steps in not with a fix, but with a trap. On the Senate floor, Chuck Schumer made what he called a simple proposal. He said Democrats are ready to reopen the government immediately. All Republicans have to do is agree to extend the Affordable Care Act premium tax credits for another year. Just 1 year. Then, he said, both parties could sit down and negotiate longer-term solutions to healthcare costs. Sounds reasonable, right? Sounds like compromise. But let's look a little closer. What Schumer's really saying is this: we'll let the government reopen, but only if you give us what we want first. That's not a negotiation. That's an ultimatum wrapped in polite language. It's a political test. He's daring Republicans to say no, knowing that every day the shutdown continues, the pressure builds on both sides. But here's the twist. Schumer is betting that Republicans will crack first. Think about it. If Republicans agree, they're handing Democrats a win on healthcare policy without getting anything meaningful in return. If they refuse, Democrats can point to them and say, see, they don't care about affordable healthcare. They don't care about reopening the government. It's a classic political maneuver, the kind that works in sound bites and campaign ads, the kind that doesn't actually solve problems, but makes one side look better than the other. But while Schumer made his pitch on the Senate floor, Trump was already 3 moves ahead. Here's where things get interesting. While Democrats are playing the shutdown like a negotiation, Trump is treating it like an opportunity, not to score political points, but to expose something much bigger, the system itself. For years, Washington has operated on the assumption that gridlock is normal, that shutdowns are just part of the process, that filibusters and procedural delays are necessary checks and balances. But what if they're not? What if they're just excuses for inaction? Trump's strategy isn't defensive, it's offensive. He's using this moment to ask a question most politicians avoid. Why does it take this long to get anything done? Why are federal workers being used as bargaining chips? Why does the public have to suffer because Congress can't agree on basic funding? And more importantly, what would happen if we changed the rules entirely? This isn't about one bill or one policy. This is about redefining how legislation moves through Congress. It's about asking whether the old playbook still works or whether it's time to write a new one. And that brings us to the most controversial idea of all: ending the filibuster. Now, if you're not familiar with the filibuster, don't worry. It's one of those Washington terms that sounds more complicated than it is. Here's the simple version. In the Senate, most bills need 60 votes to pass, not just a simple majority of 51. The filibuster is the rule that makes that happen. It's designed to slow things down, to force compromise, to make sure no single party can ram through legislation without some level of bipartisan support. In theory, it sounds good. In practice, it often means nothing gets done, because finding 60 votes in today's political climate is nearly impossible. So bills stall, debates drag on, and the public watches as their elected officials accomplish less and less each year. Trump's team is now openly discussing whether it's time to end the filibuster. Not forever, maybe. Not for everything, perhaps. But for now, while they have control, while they have momentum, while they have a mandate from voters who are tired of waiting, the argument is straightforward. If you're going to lead, lead all the way. Don't let procedural rules become an excuse for inaction. Of course, this idea terrifies Democrats because they know that if the filibuster goes away, Trump's agenda moves forward at full speed. Tax reform, immigration policy, healthcare changes, judicial appointments, all of it could pass with just 51 votes. No delays, no drawn-out negotiations, no leverage for the minority party. But here's the paradox. Democrats have talked about ending the filibuster too, especially when they've been in power and frustrated by Republican obstruction. So the real question isn't whether it's a good idea or a bad idea. The real question is, who do you trust with that kind of power? And to understand the reaction, we have to look at what's collapsing on the other side, the Democratic strategy. Right now, the Democratic Party is in a strange place. They just won some local elections in deep blue states, Virginia, New Jersey, New York, and they're celebrating those wins as if they prove something. But here's the reality. Winning in areas you already control isn't a sign of strength, it's a sign of survival. And even those wins weren't as strong as they should have been. Take Virginia, for example. The Democrat who won there got almost the exact same number of votes as the Democrat who lost the previous election. The base turned out, sure, but there was no surge, no wave, no overwhelming mandate, just enough people showed up to keep the seat blue. That's not momentum, that's maintenance. Meanwhile, polls are showing something even more troubling for Democrats. When voters are asked who leads the Democratic Party, the most common answer is, don't know. 21% said they don't know. Kamala Harris came in second at 16%. Chuck Schumer, 7.7. Hakeem Jeffries, 7.4. Think about that for a moment. The party that's supposed to be the opposition, the party that's supposed to be offering a clear alternative vision for America's future, doesn't have a clear leader. There's no unified voice, no single-figure people rally around, just a collection of politicians with different priorities, different messages, different ideas about where the party should go. Compare that to the Republican side. Love him or hate him, Donald Trump is the undisputed leader. When he speaks, the party listens. When he sets a direction, they follow. That kind of clarity, that kind of focus, gives him a massive strategic advantage. It means he can move fast, make bold decisions, and know that his party will back him up. And that confusion is showing up on the ground, especially in the cities that were supposed to be their success stories. Let's talk about Chicago for a minute. Chicago was supposed to be a model of progressive governance, a sanctuary city, a place where democratic policies could be tested and refined and eventually rolled out nationwide. But right now, Chicago is falling apart, and it's becoming a symbol of everything that's going wrong with the democratic approach. Just this week, 14 women were arrested outside an ICE detention facility in Broadview, Illinois. They were blocking traffic, obstructing federal officers, trying to prevent deportations. Now, you can agree or disagree with their cause, but here's the problem. Instead of enforcing the law, instead of maintaining order, instead of making sure federal agents can do their jobs safely, the city allowed chaos to erupt. And when ICE officers finally had to use crowd control measures, Democrats blamed them for being too aggressive. Then there's the legal battle. A federal judge just ruled that ICE agents in Chicago have to wear body cameras, give 2 warnings before using any crowd control tools, and follow a whole list of restrictions that don't apply anywhere else in the country. Think about that. Federal officers doing their jobs in one city have to follow different rules than federal officers in every other city. That's not justice. That's obstruction, dressed up as oversight. And where's Chicago's mayor during all this? Brandon Johnson, the man in charge, has an approval rating that's underwater in every single poll. The highest rating he's gotten recently is 39%. The lowest? 15%. And instead of staying home to fix the mess, he flew to the United Nations to give a speech about dignity and human rights. He's asking the UN to hold the federal government accountable for immigration enforcement in his city. Let me say that again. The mayor of Chicago, a city struggling with crime, budget deficits, failing schools, and a migrant crisis he helped create by declaring it a sanctuary city, is asking the United Nations to intervene in American domestic policy. It's not just Chicago, it's the entire political system running on noise instead of solutions. And nowhere is that more obvious than in the debate over healthcare. Because at the heart of the shutdown, beneath all the political posturing, is a fight over Obamacare subsidies. And if you're scratching your head wondering why healthcare subsidies are causing a government shutdown, you're not alone. Let me break it down. When the Affordable Care Act Obamacare was passed, the promise was simple. Healthcare would become affordable for everyone. People who couldn't afford insurance would get help from the government. Premiums would go down, coverage would go up. It sounded great. But here's what actually happened. Healthcare didn't get more affordable. For many people, it got more expensive. Premiums went up, deductibles went up, and to keep the system from collapsing, the government started paying subsidies, essentially cash payments to insurance companies to keep premiums artificially lower for certain people. These subsidies were supposed to be temporary, but like most temporary government programs, they kept getting extended. Now those subsidies are about to expire, and Democrats are insisting they be extended for another year as part of any deal to reopen the government. But here's the part that should make you angry. Those subsidies don't go to you. They go to the insurance companies. $35 billion of taxpayer money handed directly to corporations with no requirement that they lower your premiums. No accountability, no strings attached. Senator John Kennedy from Louisiana put it perfectly. He said, extending the subsidies without reform is like giving insurance companies $35 billion and expecting them to do something good with it out of the kindness of their hearts. It's not going to happen. They're going to take the money and keep raising premiums, because that's what corporations do when there's no incentive to do otherwise. So when Schumer says he wants to extend the subsidies to help people afford health care, what he's really saying is he wants to keep sending billions to insurance companies so the system doesn't collapse before the next election. It's not about helping you. It's about protecting a broken system long enough to avoid political embarrassment. And this awakening isn't just economic, it's emotional. You know, it's interesting. Over the past few weeks, more and more ordinary people are starting to figure this out. Not because they're policy experts, not because they read dense reports or watch hours of congressional hearings, but because they're living it. They're seeing their premiums go up while politicians talk about affordability. They're watching the government shut down over healthcare subsidies that don't actually help them. They're stuck in airports because air traffic controllers can't afford to show up for work, all while Congress argues over who gets the blame. There was a moment captured on video recently that stuck with me. A woman, not a politician, not a pundit, just a regular person, posted a short clip where she said she'd just gone down the Affordable Care Act rabbit hole. She'd looked into how the subsidies actually work, where the money goes, who benefits. And she was genuinely shocked. She said, this is such a scam, and people aren't even outraged. And she's right. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. The system was sold as helping people, but it's really helping corporations. And taxpayers are footing the bill for both. That's the kind of awakening that changes things. Because once people see through the illusion, they don't go back. They start asking harder questions. They start demanding real answers. And they stop accepting political theater as a substitute for progress. That's the shift happening right now. And it's not coming from Washington. It's coming from the ground up. Which brings us to the moment we're in. Trump's team understands that timing is everything. They know that public frustration is at a breaking point. They know that people are tired of the same old scripts, the same old excuses, the same old promises that never materialize. And they're using the shutdown not just to win a negotiation, but to force a much bigger conversation. What if Congress didn't work this way? What if bills didn't take months or years to pass? What if the filibuster, the procedural delays, the endless committee meetings, what if all of that was just bureaucratic inertia disguised as careful deliberation? What if you could cut through all of it and actually govern? That's the question Trump is forcing America to answer. And it's not a comfortable question because it challenges the assumptions we've lived with for decades. It suggests that maybe the system we've been told is protecting us is actually holding us back. And it raises the possibility that dismantling that system, even partially, even temporarily, might be the only way to move forward. But here's the thing about bold moves. They come with risk. Think about it this way. When you're driving a car that's barely running, you have two choices. You can keep nursing it along, hoping it makes it to the next gas station, or you can pull over, pop the hood, and rebuild the engine right there on the side of the road. The first option feels safer. The second option gets you moving faster if you know what you're doing. But if you don't, you might end up stranded. That's essentially what Trump is proposing. A total reset of how Congress operates. Not a patch job, not a temporary fix, a fundamental redesign, and the shutdown is the leverage he needs to make it happen. Here's how it works. Right now, both parties are under pressure. Democrats want the government reopened so they can stop taking heat for airport delays, missed paychecks, and angry constituents. Republicans want it reopened so they can move on to their actual agenda, tax cuts, border security, judicial appointments. But Trump is saying, why reopen the government under the same broken rules that got us here in the first place? Instead, he's using the crisis as proof that the system needs a reboot. He's arguing that if Congress can't even pass a basic funding bill without weeks of drama, maybe the problem isn't the people, maybe it's the process. And if the process is broken, why not fix it now, while everyone's paying attention, while the pain is fresh, while the public is demanding change? This is classic disruptor thinking. If you've ever watched a company go through restructuring, you know how it works. You don't wait for the perfect moment. You use the crisis as the catalyst. You take the thing that everyone says is impossible and you make it inevitable. Because people will accept radical change when they're hurting. They'll resist it when they're comfortable. And Trump's team knows this. They've studied the patterns. They've watched how Washington operates. They've seen how Congress kicks the can down the road, election after election, never actually solving anything, just managing crises until the next one comes along. And they've decided, not this time. The boldest part of Trump's plan isn't just ending the filibuster, though that's radical enough. It's what comes after. Because once you remove that procedural barrier, once you clear the path for a simple majority to pass legislation, you can move at a pace Washington hasn't seen in generations. You can pass comprehensive immigration reform. You can restructure the tax code. You can confirm judges and cabinet members without months of delay. You can actually deliver on campaign promises before the next election cycle. But, and this is the critical part, you can also make mistakes at that same speed. You can pass laws that haven't been fully vetted. You can push through changes that sound good in theory but create chaos in practice. You can consolidate power in ways that make half the country feel like they've lost their voice entirely. It's a trade-off. Efficiency versus caution. Speed versus stability. And the question isn't which one is objectively better. The question is, what does America need right now? Because the system can absolutely handle change. The question is whether the people running it can handle the responsibility that comes with it. Let's think through what actually happens if the filibuster ends and Trump pushes his full agenda through Congress in rapid succession. On day one, you might see a major border security bill pass. Within a week, tax reform. Within a month, healthcare restructuring. By the end of the first 100 days, you could have more major legislation passed than in the previous 4 years combined. For Trump supporters, that sounds like a dream. Finally, a government that works. Finally, action instead of talk. Finally, campaign promises kept. But for Democrats and anyone who values checks and balances, it sounds like a nightmare. Because what happens in 2 years if Democrats win back Congress? What happens if they use those same rules to undo everything Trump just did and push through their own agenda with zero Republican input? You end up with a government that swings wildly every election cycle, where nothing is stable, where long-term planning becomes impossible because the rules change every 2 years. That's the hidden cost of removing friction from the system. Yes, things move faster. Yes, you get more done. But you also lose the buffers that prevent overreach. You lose the cooling-off periods that allow for public debate and adjustment. You lose the mechanisms that force opposing sides to at least talk to each other. In engineering, we have a principle. Remove friction carefully. Because friction isn't always bad. Sometimes it's the thing keeping the gears from grinding each other to dust. Sometimes it's the difference between controlled acceleration and a catastrophic crash. The same is true in politics. The filibuster creates friction. Shutdowns create friction. Congressional debates create friction. And yes, that friction slows things down. But it also prevents any one party from remaking the country in its image overnight. It forces compromise, even when compromise feels impossible. It reminds everyone that in a democracy, you have to govern for all the people, not just the ones who voted for you. So when we talk about Trump's bold move, we have to be honest about what we're really discussing. We're not just talking about ending a shutdown or passing a healthcare bill. We're talking about whether America is ready to operate at a fundamentally different speed, whether the benefits of rapid change outweigh the risks of rapid mistakes, whether the public trusts their elected officials to wield power responsibly when the usual constraints are removed. And here's where it gets personal, because this isn't an abstract debate. The decisions being made right now in Washington will directly affect your life, your healthcare costs, your taxes, your Social Security, the safety of your neighborhood, the opportunities available to your grandchildren. All of it is on the table. If the filibuster goes away and Trump's agenda moves forward at full speed, some of those changes will probably be good for you. Some might not be. But they'll happen fast, and once they're law, they're hard to undo. On the other hand, if the filibuster stays and the shutdown drags on and Congress keeps operating the way it always has, you'll get stability, but you'll also get stagnation. The problems you're frustrated with now will still be there next year and the year after that. Neither option is perfect. Both come with trade-offs, and the people pushing each option have their own motivations, their own political calculations, their own ideas about what's best for the country. Your job, our job, is to cut through the noise and figure out what we actually want. Which brings us to the bigger lesson here, not about parties, but about progress. Because what we're really witnessing right now is America at a crossroads. Not the kind of crossroads politicians talk about in speeches, where they pretend every election is the most important one in history, but a real structural crossroads, a moment where the country has to decide whether to cling to the way things have always been done or embrace a fundamentally different approach. On one side, you have the traditionalists, the people who believe the system, for all its flaws, has served America well for over 200 years, that the checks and balances, the slow deliberation, the procedural rules, all of it exists for a reason, that tearing it down in pursuit of short-term wins will create long-term damage. That stability matters more than speed. On the other side, you have the reformers, the people who believe the system is broken beyond repair, that the gridlock, the corruption, the endless delays, all of it is proof that the old rules don't work anymore, that clinging to tradition is just an excuse for inaction, that the only way to fix what's broken is to rebuild from the ground up, even if it's painful, even if it's risky. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Both sides have a point. The system is broken. Anyone paying attention can see that. Congress has an approval rating in the low 20s, and it's been that way for years. Trust in government is at historic lows. People are frustrated, angry, and tired of being told that change is coming when nothing ever changes. The reformers are right that something has to give. But the system is also fragile. Democracies don't fail overnight. They fail slowly, through a series of decisions that seem reasonable at the time but accumulate into something dangerous. They fail when leaders start believing that the ends justify the means, when procedural norms get dismissed as obstacles rather than protections, when winning becomes more important than governing well. The traditionalists are right that we need to be careful. So what do we do? How do we navigate this crossroads? I think the answer starts with asking better questions. Instead of asking, do I trust Trump or do I trust Schumer, we should be asking, what kind of government do I want? Instead of asking which party should win, we should be asking what problems need solving and what's the best way to solve them. Because here's the thing. Politicians come and go. Parties rise and fall. But the choices we make about how our government operates, those last. If we end the filibuster, that's not a Trump decision or a Republican decision, that's an American decision. And it will still be in effect long after Trump is gone, when different people with different priorities are in power. Are we comfortable with that? If we keep the government shut down until one side gives in completely, that sets a precedent too. It tells future politicians that shutdowns are effective negotiating tools, that the public will tolerate weeks or months of disruption if it means their side wins, that governing takes a back seat to political combat. Are we comfortable with that? These are the real questions, and they don't have easy answers, but they're the ones worth wrestling with, because the choice we're making isn't between Trump and Schumer. It's between two different visions of what America should be. One vision says, move fast, break things if you have to, trust that the system can adapt, trust that bold action is better than careful inaction, trust that the people in power right now will use that power wisely. The other vision says, move carefully, protect the institutions, trust that the system, even when it's slow and frustrating, prevents catastrophic mistakes. Trust that compromise, even when it's painful, produces better outcomes than unilateral action. Trust that the next election will provide a course correction if needed. Neither vision is crazy. Neither is obviously right or obviously wrong. They're just different frameworks for thinking about progress. And the decision America makes over the next few weeks will signal which framework we're choosing. Now, I want to be clear about something. I'm not telling you which side to pick. I'm not here to convince you that Trump's plan is brilliant or that Schumer's caution is wise. What I am saying is that this moment matters, that the decisions being made right now will shape the country your grandchildren inherit, and that it's worth paying attention, asking hard questions, and demanding real answers from the people who represent you. Because here's what I've learned over the years, whether it's in business or engineering or politics, systems change when people stop accepting the status quo, not when leaders decide it's time, not when experts agree, when ordinary people look at the way things are and say this isn't working anymore. That's the moment we're in. Air traffic controllers calling in because they can't afford gas, travelers trapped in airports, federal workers lining up at food banks, a mayor with a 15% approval rating asking the UN to intervene in his own city, healthcare subsidies that cost $35 billion but don't actually make healthcare affordable, a Senate minority leader offering a compromise that's really an ultimatum, a president threatening to rewrite the rules of Congress entirely. None of this is normal. And the fact that it's starting to feel normal should concern us, because when dysfunction becomes the baseline, when chaos becomes expected, we stop demanding better. We just try to survive it. But we don't have to accept it. We can demand accountability. We can demand real solutions instead of political theater. We can demand that our elected officials do the job we hired them to do, govern. So what do you think? Should the system be protected, even if it keeps things slow, or should it be rebuilt completely, even if it shakes the foundation? Should we trust Trump's vision of rapid, disruptive change, or should we trust Schumer's vision of careful, incremental negotiation? Should Congress end the filibuster and move fast, or keep it and move carefully? These aren't rhetorical questions. I genuinely want to know where you stand, because the answer isn't obvious, and it's worth debating. Let me know in the comments. I actually read them, and I want to know what you're thinking. Are you in the burn it down and rebuild camp, or the protect the system at all costs camp, or somewhere in between? If this gave you some new perspective, if it helped you think through the trade-offs, hit the like button and subscribe, because we will keep exploring these topics. We'll explore what this means for you and the future of American democracy itself. We'll look at what happens if the shutdown continues into month 3, what happens if the filibuster actually ends, and what history tells us about moments like this. Because this isn't the first time America has faced a